Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is where we share those stories that keep you up at night, or make your bedtime just a little more unsettling. I'm glad you're here tonight because what I have for you is something truly chilling. A tale of fear, paranoia, and things far beyond explanation. So dim the lights, grab your headphones if you're alone, and settle in, like, subscribe, and share. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Let's dive into it. The light in the discharge room hummed like an insect trapped beneath glass. Thin, whining, and too bright for a place meant to send fragile people back into the world. It had that particular hospital quality. Not quite white, not quite blue, just institutional. A color that didn't exist in nature. A color meant to keep people awake, obedient and quietly afraid. Paige Harper sat at the small metal desk, hands trembling slightly as she held the release form. Her name was typed at the top in bold black letters. Harper, Paige Eat, but it felt foreign, as though it belonged to someone she might have once known. Her signature looked more like a child's attempt at copying cursive than the handwriting of a 28-year-old woman with a graduate degree. The nurse across from her didn't seem to notice the shaky loops and slanted lines. Or if she did, she didn't care. Pinehurst Behavioral Health had a way of stripping the humanity out of everyone who worked inside it, slowly, quietly, like erosion. Nurse Lorna Briggs, L., according to her badge, flipped papers with brisk mechanical efficiency. Middle-aged, short hair, expression as neutral as wet clay. Her eyes never quite landed on Paige's face, always drifting just above or beside her, as though eye contact might violate some unwritten protocol. "You want to sign on the final page as well," Briggs murmured, her voice soft but flat. "Initial here and there." Paige tried to swallow. Her throat felt scratchy, raw, like she'd swallowed pine needles. "Can you remind me again what I'm signing?" Briggs paused just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. "Standard discharge paperwork. Statement of orientation, treatment summary, medication list, release of liability." She pushed another page forward. "You've been cleared." "By who?" "The neurologist." Briggs still hadn't made eye contact. "Dr. Harlan reviewed your scans. Your cognitive function is stable." Stable. Stable like a damaged table leg that wobbles but doesn't quite fall. Stable like a heartbeat that has forgotten its rhythm, but keeps going anyway. Stable like someone who has no memory of the last month of her life. Paige stared down at the papers again. She recognized the words, but couldn't connect them to anything inside herself. The amnesia was neither total nor partial. It was selective in a way that felt intentional, curated, like a museum with entire wings missing. "What about the head injury?" she asked carefully. "Your wound is healing," Briggs said. "Keep the bandage on another week. No heavy lifting. You'll follow up with outpatient neurology in Burlington." Burlington. The word felt both familiar and hollow at the same time, like a hometown she'd only visited in dreams. Briggs reached beneath the desk and pulled up a large, clear plastic evidence-style bag, sealed with a white label. She slid it gently across the metal surface toward Paige. "Your personal effects." Inside the bag lay fragments of a life she did not fully recognize. A cracked iPhone, a navy blue wallet, a key ring with 3 mismatched keys, a pair of silver earrings she didn't remember wearing, a folded piece of paper stained with something brownish. The sight of the phone made her stomach twist. Fear, maybe, or anticipation. But she wasn't ready to confront it. The screen was shattered like a spiderweb. She wondered if someone had stepped on it, or thrown it, or if she had dropped it when she was what? Running? Falling? Bleeding? The memories were fuzzy, watery things that dissolved whenever she tried to hold them. Briggs offered a pen. "Sign here to confirm receipt of your belongings." Paige signed. Her hand shook worse this time. The letters unraveled themselves, became loops and jagged scratches. She winced at the sight of it. She used to have neat handwriting. She remembered that much. She'd prided herself on the clean curves of her letters, the sharpness of her T's. This signature looked like someone's frantic last message. When she slid the clipboard back across the desk, Briggs stamped the papers with quick, loud thuds, one stamp for every page. They sounded like distant gunshots, or doors slamming shut. Your transport is waiting outside. Briggs said, he'll take you home. Transport? Paige repeated. Who arranged that? Your sister. It was such a casual lie, so confidently delivered, that Paige almost accepted it. Almost. Except she didn't have a sister. She knew she didn't. That was one of the few solid things left in her fractured memory. I don't have a sister. For the first time, Briggs's expression shifted. Not to concern. Not to apology. To irritation. All the arrangements have been made. You review your details at home. Paige opened her mouth again, but Briggs was already gathering the documents into a neat stack, aligning the edges with surgeon-like precision. Conversation over. A cold prickle crawled up Paige's neck. Something was wrong here. Something had been wrong since the moment she woke up in this place. But without memories, she had no way of measuring wrongness. Only instinct. And instinct alone made her feel fragile, like blown glass. Two orderlies appeared in the doorway, one tall and broad, the other younger and stiff. They looked like siblings carved from the same pale wood. Neither spoke. They simply waited. Escort her to the main entrance, Briggs said, already turning away. Paige stood slowly. The moment she did, her head throbbed, sharp, sudden pain behind her right temple, radiating outward like heat from a stove coil. She pressed fingers lightly against a bandage, wincing. The gauze felt thick, foreign, a presence rather than a covering. Take your time, the younger orderly said, his tone polite but hollow. But Paige had the strange sensation that they didn't want her taking her time at all. That the goal was to move her, usher her out, get her gone, like a problem being quietly removed, like a witness being escorted off the stage. As they walked the hallway, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere, something she hadn't seen before. Patients pressed farther into corners. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A woman in a wheelchair began rocking back and forth, whispering something over and over in a language Paige didn't recognize. The orderlies kept their pace steady. Doors hummed shut behind them. The recreation room loomed ahead. Paige didn't want to look inside, but her eyes drifted anyway. 3 patients stood at the glass. 3 figures she'd seen only in passing before. They watched her now with unnatural stillness, bodies rigid, faces unreadable. All 3 raised their right hands. All 3 tapped 2 fingers against their temples. Tap, tap, then pointed. Not at her, at whoever was waiting for her outside. A strange, icy dread flooded through Paige's stomach. A total, instinctual certainty. This was not a ritual. This was not madness. This was a warning. But before she could say anything, the older orderly nudged her gently toward the door. Don't pay attention to them, he murmured. That's just noise. His voice trembled slightly. Outside, the October air hit her like a slap, cold, sharp, metallic. Vermont forest surrounded the building on all sides, the trees illuminated in violent shades of orange and red, their leaves like burning paper. A dark blue sedan idled at the bottom of the steps. A man leaned against it. Tall, well-built, early 40s perhaps. His smile was gentle, practiced, the kind of smile that looked good in photos. When he saw her, he lifted a hand. Paige? There you are. The orderlies stopped at the threshold. They did not step outside. Paige hesitated. The man's expression softened. I'm Grant. I'm here to take you home. Home. The word felt big. Too big. She searched her mind for anything. Any flicker of recognition. Nothing. But the patience in the window. The tapping. The pointing. Her injured temple pulsed. Once, twice. Like a heartbeat trying to warn her of something long forgotten. And then she saw it. The faintest twitch at the corner of Grant's face. A muscle spasm. No, not a spasm. A movement. 2 fingers rising toward his temple. Paige blinked, and he casually scratched his forehead instead. Or maybe not casually. Her stomach churned. Grant opened the passenger door. It's a long drive, Paige. Let's get you warm. Warm. Safe. Home. But nothing in his voice felt warm. Or safe. Or familiar. Still, the orderlies behind her stepped back. The large one closed the glass doors with a soft click. Paige stood alone at the top of the steps, cold wind threading through her hospital-issued coat. Grant gestured to the car again. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The windows above filled with watching silhouettes. And somewhere deep inside her skull, a memory strained against the fog. A memory involving a knock on a door, a man claiming to be a detective, a badge, a lie. Paige swallowed hard and stepped toward the car. I used to think the worst sound in the world was the squeal of metal on metal, like the brakes of the county bus that used to pick me up for school when I was a kid. But now I know better. The worst sound in the world is the sound of a key turning on the inside of a locked door. The sound of someone deciding that you can finally go home, or that you can't. At Pinehurst Behavioral Center, that sound became the rhythm of my life. Keys turning, locks clicking, shoes squeaking on hospital tile. Door in, door out. And now, finally one last time, the key turned for me. A nurse I'd never seen before poked her head into the room. She looked tired in the way staff here always did. But there was something else too, something like wariness, like she expected me to do something strange, unpredictable, dangerous. Elias? She asked softly, though we were the only two people in the discharge room. They're ready for you. I stood. My legs felt hollow, shaky, as if they hadn't held my weight in years. How long has it been? I asked her. She blinked. Pardon? My stay. How long was it really? She had my file in her hand. She didn't open it. You checked in 4 months ago. That's not what the clock in my room said. She pressed her lips together and offered no answer. The staff at Pinehurst had perfected the art of not responding. I didn't blame them. People here saw too much, heard too much, became the unwilling vaults of things broken minds whisper at night. Follow me, she said. I did. The hall felt too bright, too clean, too quiet. The nurse walked briskly, while I dragged a small plastic bag of my returned belongings. Inside were the things I apparently came with. A phone with a cracked screen, a wallet with $16, keys to an apartment I didn't remember renting, and a hospital bracelet that wasn't the one I'd arrived wearing. Something was wrong with all of it, but everything had been wrong since the night I arrived here. The night I can't remember. When we reached the lobby doors, those thick double doors you can only exit when someone buzzes you out, the nurse stopped. Before you go, she said, you'll need to sign your final release forms with Dr. Halden. My stomach dropped. I thought I was cleared. You are. This is just the final step. Her eyes darted to the security camera in the corner. Everyone completes a final step. The way she said it made a cold, slow ribbon slide down my spine. She pushed open the door to a small office. Dr. Halden was inside. He was not the doctor assigned to me during my stay. He was not anyone I had ever seen. He was smiling too widely. Elias, good morning. Come in. The nurse closed the door behind me. And for the first time since waking up in this place a month ago, I heard the unmistakable sound of the door locking from the outside. I turned to him. Why did she lock the door? Halden chuckled as though I had said something amusing. Hospital protocol. Nothing more. Have a seat. His office was dimmer than the hall. Warmer too, almost uncomfortably so. One faint lamp lit the corner, casting soft, pulsing shadows across the shelves of files that lined the walls. His desk was neat. Too neat. No pen scattered. No stray paper. Just a recorder, a clipboard, and one of those thick old binder folders with a patient's name on the spine. Mine. I sat. My hands trembled, but I kept them in my lap, so he wouldn't see. You're being discharged today, he said, flipping open the folder. That's a big step. How do you feel? Nervous. That's normal. I don't remember checking in. He glanced at me over his glasses. Trauma can do that. What happened to me? He hesitated. Just for a moment. You experienced an episode. Dissociation. Memory gaps aren't uncommon. Can you tell me what kind of episode? What triggered it? What I said when I came in? Who checked me in? He closed the folder. Elias, you will remember things as your mind continues to heal. It's important that we don't impose false narratives onto your recall. That wasn't an answer. None of his answers were answers. Can I see the incident report? I asked. My admitting paperwork. Not necessary for discharge. I leaned forward. I want to know why I was here. He smiled again. It didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes, Elias, it's safer not to know. I opened my mouth to respond, but he raised his hand. Let's move on to your release requirements. You are to avoid stimulants, stressful environments, and any location associated with your prior stressors. Additionally, my prior what? He ignored me. Additionally, we advise you not to return to the site of the break. Familiarity can trigger relapse. What site? What break? He lifted the pen, ready to sign the form. Elias, you are stable. You are safe. Your mind is in recovery. That is enough for today. I felt heat rising in my chest. Why won't you answer me? He finally looked up again. Because you asked us not to. My blood turned cold. What does that mean? You signed an internal directive during intake stating you did not wish to be briefed until you believed yourself fully recovered. You insisted it was for your own protection. Protection from what? From yourself. My mouth went dry. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. I never signed something like that. I whispered. He rotated the clipboard and slid it toward me. Your signature is right here. I stared at the document, and there it was, my name, written in my handwriting. Except it wasn't. It looked like my handwriting. Similar spacing, similar slant, but the signature curve in a way mine never had. Almost like someone trying to imitate it. Can I have this paper? I asked quietly. No, I want a copy. No. My hands began shaking again. Why? Not. Because, he said pleasantly, you're already becoming agitated. He reached toward a drawer slowly, calmly, consciously, like someone trying not to spook a wild animal. I flinched back. He paused, staring at me. There's no need for fear, Elias. This is simply your medication schedule for the next 6 weeks. His fingers tapped the manila envelope resting inside the drawer. But I knew that he had been about to grab something else. He just changed course when I reacted. What else do you keep in that drawer? I asked. He smiled. Only what's necessary. I stood abruptly, unlocked the door. Sit down, Elias. I'm not signing anything until I know what happened to me. His voice hardened. That would be a mistake. My throat tightened. Unlocked the door. He folded his hands slowly. Elias, do you remember what you said the night you arrived? No. He nodded once. Good. Let's keep it that way. He pressed a button under his desk. A buzzing sound echoed through the office. The door clicked open behind me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he said, softly, "You'll be back." Not if I can help it. He gathered the folder. The world outside is very good at unraveling people, Elias. Especially people who have already come apart once. I stepped backward, 1 foot in the hall. He added, "When the memories return, and they will, you come directly back here. Do not talk to anyone about them. Do not go to the place where it happened. Do not contact the people involved." What people? He tilted his head. You know exactly who. I didn't, but a flicker of something. Something like a shadow passing behind my eyes. Made my breath itch. He noticed. "Ah," he said softly. "There it is. A fragment." I turned and walked out before he could say anything else. The nurse from before stood, waiting down the hall. She didn't look me in the eye. "Your ride will be here in 2 minutes. You can wait outside." My ride. Someone arranged a pickup. Who? She shook her head. It wasn't me. Was it my family? She hesitated. And that was enough. I walked past her, through the double doors, and out into the afternoon light. The air was cold, sharp, too real. For a moment, I stood there blinking at the brightness, the world outside feeling stretched and strange, like a dream half remembered. That's when I saw him, a man leaning against a faded blue sedan, hood up, hands in his pockets. staring at me. He straightened when our eyes met. "Elias," he said, "over here." I froze. I had never seen this man in my life. He opened the passenger door. "I'm the one picking you up." "Who sent you?" He smiled faintly. "You did." My skin prickled. "I don't know you." "You will," he said, "once your memory comes back." I took a step back. "I'm not going anywhere with you." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "You told me you'd say that. You told me to expect it." My pulse thundered. "Stay away from me." He held up his hands. "Elias, listen. I don't know you. You don't remember me. I'm not getting in that car. You promised me you would." "I don't care. Leave me alone." His face changed, from patient to something like heartbreak. "You don't understand," he said. "If you don't get in this car, you won't make it through the week." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" He took a slow step toward me. "Just get in the car. Elias, please. You told me this was the only way to keep you alive." The man didn't move any closer, but something about the way he watched me, expectant, patient, almost relieved, made my stomach twist. We stood in the cracked parking lot of Pinehurst Behavioral Center, under a sky the color of old steel. Cars whispered past on the main road beyond the gate, but here in the lot, it felt like the world had gone still. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" I asked. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked younger. Not physically. You couldn't fix the faint crow's feet under his eyes or the rough stubble on his chin. But younger in the way a person looks when they're remembering something tender or painful. "My name is Rowan," he said. "And before you ask again, yes, you know me, or you did." I took a step backward, my hand tightening around the plastic bag of belongings the hospital had given me. "I'm leaving," I said. "Don't follow me." But he didn't step forward, didn't reach for me, didn't even raise his voice. He just said, "Elias, you called me the night it happened. I was the one who brought you to Pinehurst." A cold gust of wind sliced through the parking lot, carrying the scent of pine and rain. "I didn't call you," I whispered. "Yes, you did." He took a slow breath. "It was the last thing you did before you collapsed." I shook my head. "I don't even know your name." "You don't remember my name." He nodded once as though confirming something to himself. "They said this might happen." "Who is they?" "You told the doctors you didn't want the details yet," he said. "You want to get stable first. You made all of us promise not to tell you anything until you were discharged." I swallowed. My voice barely came out. "So all of you agreed?" Rowan's eyes softened. "You begged us. You said if we told you too soon, you'd..." He stopped. "I'd what?" I pushed. He hesitated, then whispered, "You said you'd break again." The wind rustled through the trees at the edge of the lot, making them shiver. My fingers felt numb. "I'm leaving," I said again. "I don't trust you. You trusted me that night." "I don't remember that night." "That's why I'm here," he said gently. "You told me your memories would come back in pieces. You said I had to help you fit them together." He reached into his coat slowly, slow enough that I could see he wasn't hiding anything in his hands, and pulled out a folded slip of paper. He held it out. I didn't take it. "It's in your handwriting," he said. "You gave it to me before they took you inside." I hesitated. Then, slowly, I stepped closer and took the paper. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The writing was jagged, messy, like someone had written in the dark, or while shaking uncontrollably. But it was my handwriting. And the message was short. "If I forget, do not let me go back alone." My breath caught in my throat. "What does this mean?" I whispered. "That," Rowan said, "is what I want you to tell me." My eyes darted to his. "Tell you?" He exhaled shakily. "Elias, I don't know what happened in that house either." I froze. "What house?" He shook his head. "Not here. Not while we're exposed." A shiver crawled down my spine. "Tell me now." "No." His voice sharpened. "Not in the parking lot. Not where anyone could be watching." A car drove past on the road, its headlights sweeping briefly across us. For a moment, Rowan's face looked older, gaunt, tired, etched with something like worry or fear. "We need to talk somewhere safe," he said. "Please. You trusted yourself enough to write that note. Trust that version of you now." I looked at the car he'd brought. A beat-up blue sedan. The kind of car that wouldn't attract attention. Something deep in my gut twisted. "I don't want to go with you." "You have to." "No, I don't." He nodded slowly. "You're right. You don't." I blinked. That surprised me. "But if you leave now," he continued, "you'll go back to your apartment, right?" I didn't answer. "And when you open the door," he said, voice low and steady, "you're going to see something that will make you call me again. Something that made you call me the last time." My heart stuttered. What did I see? His jaw tightened. "You told me not to look," he said. "You screamed at me not to look." The wind hollowed out. All sound drained from the air. What was in my apartment? I whispered. He didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, "I don't know." Then softer, "I don't want to know." My chest felt tight. "Then how do you know something was there?" "Because when you ran out of the building," he said, "you were covered in mud up to your elbows." He paused. "And you were holding something." The world tilted slightly. What was I holding? "You dropped it before I got to you." His voice lowered. "The police never found it." A sharp, panic pulse beat through my skull. I didn't remember dropping anything. I didn't remember running. I didn't remember Rowan. I didn't remember 4 months inside Pinehurst. I didn't remember. Rowan took one step closer, slow and measured. "We can figure it out," he said. "Together, but not here. It's not safe." "Why not?" He glanced toward the tree line behind the hospital. The woods were thick and dark, even in daylight, because they might be watching. My blood turned to ice. "Who?" He swallowed. "The people you warned me about." I stared at him. He stared back. Neither of us breathed. "What people?" I whispered. Rowan's voice broke slightly. "The ones you said followed you out of that house." The wind rose again, low, moaning, threading through the trees like something alive. A cold prickle danced down the back of my neck. Rowan held the car door open again. "Elias," he said softly, "get in." I stared at the open door. At Rowan. At the woods. Something inside me, something small and frightened and ancient, felt like it curled in on itself. But another feeling rose beneath it. Something heavier. Something like dread. Like memory trying to claw its way up from the dark. Because Rowan was wrong. I did remember something. Not a place. Not a person. Not an event. Just a sound. A low, rhythmic knocking. Slow. Calm. Deliberate. Not on a door. On wood. Earthy wood. Like the inside of... I cut the memory off before it fully surfaced. Rowan lowered his eyes. "You're remembering something, aren't you?" I didn't answer. "Elias," he said, voice trembling now. "Please get in the car before it starts again." Before it starts again, I opened my mouth. But then, from the tree line, something moved. Not a person. Not an animal. Something too tall. Too thin. Too still. Staring. I felt the color drain from my face. Rowan saw my expression and didn't turn. He just whispered, "You see it too, don't you?" My throat went dry. "Get in the car," he said. "Right now." I didn't think. I didn't look back. I opened the passenger door and got in. Rowan slammed the door, sprinted around to the driver's side, and threw himself in behind the wheel. The engine sputtered, coughed, started. He pulled out a lot fast. Too fast. Tires screeching against the pavement as the blue sedan shot toward the road. As we sped away from Pinehurst, I finally found my voice. What was that in the trees? Rowan gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched. "I don't know," he whispered, "but it wasn't their last time." I stared at him. "Last time? What do you mean last time?" He didn't look at me. "You saw it before," Rowan said quietly. "The night everything went wrong." The car twisted along the narrow back roads that snaked through Vermont hills, the trees pressing close on either side like living walls. Sunlight filtered in fractured shards, hitting the dashboard in jagged patterns. The smell of pine and damp earth drifted through the slightly cracked window, but the air felt stale inside the car, like it had been sealed off from reality. I sat stiffly, gripping the edges of my seat, trying to piece together what Rowan had just told me. He hadn't lied exactly, but he'd left gaps, spaces where my memory or his version of it should have been. My hands trembled in small, involuntary spasms. "Elias," he said softly, voice low and steady. "You need to focus. Listen carefully." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Last night," he continued, "before you were taken to Pinehurst, you were in danger. Not typical danger. Something far older than that. Something human eyes were never meant to understand." I swallowed hard. "Older? What does that mean?" He shook his head. "I can't explain everything yet. Not while we're in public. But I need you to remember, even if it's only fragments. Think back just before you blacked out. Anything you saw, anything you heard, don't censor it. Don't judge it. Just let it come." I closed my eyes and let the images rise. A house, dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper that seemed to breathe. A man, tall, silent, watching me from a doorway. A sound. Not a scream, not a whisper, a tapping. 2 quick taps, then a long pause. Tap, tap, pause. I opened my eyes. Rowan's gaze sharpened. "You remember?" "Yes," I whispered, voice barely audible. "I remember the sound, but I don't know what it means. I don't remember him, or why I was there." "You were being followed," Rowan said, "and not by something ordinary." I turned to him, confusion and fear flooding me. "Not ordinary? What are you saying?" He exhaled slowly, one hand gripping the wheel. "You were marked, Elias. Not physically, not in a way you could see, but mentally, psychically, by something in that house. Something that watches, waits, and transfers itself into the unprepared." I shook my head. "You're insane." "No," he said firmly. "I would be insane if I hadn't seen it. And I would be lying if I told you it's over. You survived the first encounter, but the second will be much closer and faster. If we don't reach safety soon," his words trailed off. The road curved sharply, and I clutched the edge of my seat, stomach lurching as the sedan leaned hard. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches entwining above us, forming dark, submarine tunnels of green. Shadows flickered in impossible shapes, some resembling figures, others not. I couldn't look away. My pulse hammered in my ears. "What do you mean psychically?" I asked, voice trembling. "Are you saying it can enter my mind?" Rowan's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched until I thought the air itself had stopped. Then, "Yes." I froze. "Yes, Elias. It can enter the mind, feed on fear, manipulate perception. And it's been hunting people in this area for decades. Every town, every county, every abandoned building. It leaves marks, signs, warnings. And the people it touches," he swallowed, "sometimes survive, sometimes don't." I stared out the windshield. My fingers dug into my knees. The shadows in the trees seemed closer now, almost leaning toward the car. Something about the movement was wrong. Too precise, too deliberate. My stomach churned. "You said you brought me here last time," I said carefully. "Why? What happened to me?" He exhaled sharply. "You were shot." I turned to him, eyes wide. "What?" "One of its servants, I guess you could say, or a human agent. They tried to eliminate you. Close range. 2 shots. To the temple." I stared at him, trying to comprehend. I survived." "Yes," he said quietly. "Barely. But your mind, it was fractured, scattered. You would have died without the intervention of Pinehurst and the medications they used." I felt a cold hand of terror grip me. "So, the hospital, everything, was it real? Was I real?" Rowan shook his head slowly. "Yes and no. You were in the system. Yes. But they didn't tell you everything because revealing it too soon would have triggered your mind's defense. And if your mind had collapsed fully," he didn't finish the sentence. "I didn't need him to. The silence after his words was thick, suffocating. I don't understand, I whispered. Why are you telling me this now? I don't know you. I barely remember you. You remember enough to survive, Rowan interrupted. And that's why I'm here. You need to get somewhere safe. Not Burlington, not any city. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere beyond the old boundaries. Boundaries? I repeated, voice barely audible. What boundaries? He tapped the side of his temple once. The things that mark the land, they follow rules. Ancient ones. They may be powerful, but they are tied to the earth in ways you wouldn't believe. And the people who try to manipulate them, they rely on that. You're outside that jurisdiction now, but not for long. I didn't understand, but I felt it, a prickle in my skull, like memory trying to break through. My hand went up, touching the scar above my temple. The spot burned, the memory behind it pressing just beneath the surface. What happens if I don't go? I asked, voice shaking. Rowan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. It will find you again, faster, stronger, and next time you might not survive. I swallowed. The words made no rational sense. Yet my instinct screamed truth. My mind, fractured as it was, recognized danger. Real danger. We drove on. The sedan dipped into a shallow valley where fog hugged the ground. The trees around us were twisted now, skeletal, their roots exposed like the veins of the earth itself. Shadows moved within the fog, too synchronized, too purposeful. I tried to blink them away, but every time I looked, they were still there, watching, waiting. Rowan didn't speak for several minutes. Then quietly, they're testing you. What do you mean? The ones that followed you, the ones who shot you, they survived, but not unchanged. They want to see if you can still resist. If you fail, his jaw tightened. You become like them. I shivered. Like them, what do you mean? They're broken, he said. Physically alive, mentally shattered. Their minds tethered to whatever you saw that night. They warn others now, in their own way. That's why you saw the people in the hospital window. That's why they tapped. I remembered the tapping. The two fingers point, the frantic motions pressed against glass. They weren't performing some ritual. They were trying to save me. And now Rowan, he was telling me it was real. I swallowed the fear that lodged in my throat. So, I survived because... He shook his head. Not yet. You survived because of luck, timing, and the fact that your mind is resistant. But resistance is fragile. I turned toward him. And if I fail, then you join the others. The words hung between us. Heavy, inevitably final. The road ahead curved sharply. Fog thickened. And in that dense mist, I thought I saw a movement. Not human. Not entirely. Something slinking between the trees, just out of the corner of my eye. I gasped. Rowan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. His expression hardened. They know we've left, he said. And now, Elias, we have to reach the boundary before sunset. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know it was real. I only knew that the forest itself seemed alive now, watching, hungry, and that the stranger beside me knew too much. And I had no choice but to trust him. The fog rolled over the hills like a living thing, thickening with every mile Rowan drove. I pressed my hands against the window, but the glass did nothing to stop the chill that seeped in through my bones. Every twist and turn of the road felt like it was leading me somewhere I didn't want to go, somewhere my fractured memories had been trying to warn me about. Where are we going? I asked, my voice brittle. Rowan didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, eyes scanning the edges of the road with an intensity that made my stomach knot. Do you remember the house? He asked finally, voice low, almost a whisper. I froze. What house? I asked, but my pulse was already betraying me. The name of the place hovered at the edge of my mind, just beyond reach, and it carried a weight I didn't yet understand. The one you ran from, he said. The one where it started. My stomach twisted. I didn't remember running. I didn't remember the night, the fog, the shots, the tapping. And yet something deep inside me whispered, I had. I shook my head. I don't remember. That's why we have to go back. I stared at him. My pulse spiked. Go back? You mean you want to go back there? After everything? Rowan's jaw tightened. It's the only way to understand. To survive. To break the cycle. I swallowed. My hands clenched the plastic bag of belongings I'd been given at Pinterest. Every item inside felt alien, like someone had arranged my life without me. The keys to an apartment I didn't remember renting. The phone I couldn't recall ever owning. And yet, something in me recognized them. A faint, uneasy familiarity. The car fell silent except for the engine and the occasional distant call of a crow. The house? I said finally, my voice shaking. What's there? What did I see? Rowan's eyes flicked to me in the rear-view mirror. It remembers you, everything about you, and it doesn't forget easily. I didn't understand. The house remembers? Yes, he said. Not like a human remembers. Like it records. Every scream, every fear, every movement. It stores it in its walls, in its floors, in the air you breathe, and it uses it. The road dipped into a narrow valley, shrouded in fog, so thick it felt like driving through clouds. Trees pressed against the edges of the road, gnarled branches twisting like fingers. I shivered despite the warmth of the car. Uses it for what? I asked. Rowan didn't answer immediately. His hands tightened on the wheel. To feed, to manipulate, to trap, and it doesn't discriminate. It knows its marks, and it won't let them leave until it's finished. I felt a prickle along my spine. You mean the thing that followed me? He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He simply said, "It's not a thing, Elias. Not entirely. Not in the way you think. It's awareness, conscience, hunger, and it wants something from you." I swallowed hard. My pulse thundered in my ears. What does it want? You, he said. Your memory. Your clarity. Your mind. And if it can't have it willingly, it will take it. By force. The fog thinned as we crested a small hill, and there it was. The house. Or, rather, what remained of it. A Victorian structure, once grand, now sagging, decayed. Windows shattered. Boards nailed across doors. Ivy clawing up the sides as though the house itself were trying to strangle itself. The paint had peeled in long, curling strips. The roof sagged under the weight of decades. And yet it seemed alive, watching, waiting. I felt my breath catch. Something deep in my chest tightened. The house felt familiar, not as a building I'd visited, but as a memory of fear itself. Rowan pulled the car to a stop on the cracked driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires. He turned to me. This is where it all began. And it's where we'll end. If we survive. I didn't move. My legs felt like lead. My mind buzzed with fragments of the past. Images, sounds, smells. A tapping. 2 sharp knocks. The smell of wet earth and iron. Screaming muffled. As though coming from another room. Another life. Do you remember now? Rowan asked softly. I shook my head. Pieces. Flickers. I see shadows. Hear something, but it's not clear. He exhaled sharply. Good. That's normal. That's what the house wants. Fragmented memory makes it stronger. Confusion makes it hungry. I swallowed hard. What happens if it gets what it wants? Rowan's eyes darkened. Then you cease to be you. Your mind becomes another layer in its walls. And the cycle starts again. I shivered, feeling the chill of inevitability creep along my spine. The house seemed to pulse, breathing in the fog, in the air, in the shadowed corners of the world. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to deny everything. But Rowan placed a firm hand on my shoulder. You can't run, he said. Not now. Not anymore. You survived once, you can survive again. But only if you face it. I looked at him. His eyes, steady and fierce, held something like hope, or determination. Something human in the midst of the monstrous. The front door of the house loomed ahead, blackened and warped. Wind whispered through broken panes. A low, rhythmic tapping began. 2 taps. Pause. 2 taps. I froze. Rowan exhaled. Do you hear it? Yes, I whispered. My throat went dry. I hear it. It's calling me. He nodded. That's the house. It knows you. It remembers you. And now, it's time to see what we'll do next. I swallowed, heart hammering. My legs moved almost of their own accord toward the house. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes. Each step made my pulse spike higher. The tapping continued, echoing in my skull. Rowan fell in behind me. Stay close. Don't touch anything. Don't speak unless I tell you to. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I walked, one foot in front of the other, toward the dark, waiting mouth of the house. And then the front door opened, not slowly, not by wind, but as though the house itself had inhaled, and then let me in. A cold draft met me, carrying the scent of decay and damp wood, and something metallic, something that made my stomach twist. I stepped inside. The house had not forgotten, and neither had I. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet as I stepped further inside. Each sound echoed to the vast, empty spaces, rebounding from the walls like whispers of long-forgotten voices. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and iron, and the chill gnawed at my bones despite the late morning sun outside. Rowan stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing against my back to guide me through the darkness. The house seemed to respond to our presence, almost breathing around us, a subtle vibration in the walls and floor. Do you feel that? He asked softly. I nodded, though I couldn't put it into words. The walls seemed alive, shifting subtly, shadows twisting in impossible ways. Each room was a memory and a trap, filled with fragments of things I didn't fully remember but somehow recognized. We entered what had once been a parlor. The furniture was decayed, the upholstery torn and stained, but in the corners, the shadows seemed too precise, as though they were watching, waiting. The air vibrated with a low, rhythmic tapping. I turned toward it instinctively. 2 taps, Rowan whispered. Pause, then 2 taps again. I realized with a sickening clarity that it wasn't coming from outside or a person. It was coming from the walls themselves. The wood groaned, warped, and then struck an exact, deliberate rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. Why is it doing that? I whispered, clutching my arms around myself. It's calling, Rowan said, voice low. It wants you to remember. It wants to feed. It knows you're here, and it knows you're fragile. It's testing you. My head throbbed painfully at the sound. A deep, pulsing pain directly behind my right temple, exactly where the old scar from my gunshot had been. My memory, or something pretending to be memory, flashed in brief, jagged fragments. The hallway, the man in the doorway, a scream muffled by walls, blood pooling across worn floorboards. I staggered back, barely catching myself on a crumbling chair. Elias, focus. Rowan said firmly, don't run. Don't fight it yet. Let the memory surface. Confront it. You need clarity. I shook my head. I can't. I don't want to. I can't. The tapping intensified. The rhythm became sharper, faster, more insistent. The walls themselves seemed to lean toward me. The air growing heavier, vibrating with something almost alive. Then I saw it. A shadow moving across the far wall. Flickering. Not human. Not quite human. Long limbs, bent at impossible angles. Its head tilted unnaturally. Eyes, if they could be called that, glinting in the dim light. I gasped and stumbled back against Rowan, who caught me firmly. It's a memory, he whispered. Or a manifestation. Don't let it scare you. Focus on your memory. I closed my eyes, trying to separate the reality from the memory, the hallucination from the truth. And then a name, one name, surfaced like a jagged shard of glass. Margaret. I couldn't remember fully who she was. Only flashes. A voice calling from a doorway, a warning, a face twisted in fear. And then another sound, sharper, colder, a gunshot. Rowan noticed my change in expression. Good, he murmured. You're recalling something important. Follow the memory. I stumbled forward, guided by the fragmented images, through hallways lined with peeling wallpaper and broken mirrors. Each reflection seemed wrong, twisted. In some, I saw my own face, pale and hollow, staring back at me. But in others, it was a stranger's face, eyes wide with terror. The tapping continued, now almost deafening. 2 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause. And then a new sound, the metallic scrape of something being dragged across the floor above us. Rowan's hand tightened on my shoulder. "They're here," he whispered. "The previous victims, or what remains of them. They tried to warn you before, and they'll try again." I wanted to scream, but Rowan's grip silenced me. I realized then, the house recorded everything, every fear, every terror, every scream, and played it back to anyone it considered a mark. And now, it was replaying their warnings. I stumbled into what had once been a bedroom. The walls were covered in scratches, deep and jagged, as though someone or something had tried to claw their way out. On the floor, amidst debris, were remnants of personal belongings, a shattered mirror, a rusted locket, a child's shoe. And there, pressed against the wall, was a shadow, human-shaped, yes, but twisted, broken, and incomplete. It raised 2 fingers to its temple and pointed directly at me. Tap, tap, point. I recognized the gesture instantly. The tapping, the warning, the survivors. Rowan grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it for too long. Focus on yourself. Remember why you're here." I tried to focus, to summon the fragments of memory that had been locked away, but the pain in my head intensified, each pulse like a hammer striking bone. Images flashed behind my eyes, the hallway of the hospital, the parking lot, the man leaning against a sedan, the gun, the shots, and then clarity, just a sliver. I wasn't the first. I was the 4th. The others hadn't died. They had survived, trapped in a living nightmare, their minds broken, their only way to warn me. The tapping. I gasped. The shadow on the wall jerked violently. Tap, tap, point. Rowan gripped my arm tighter. "You understand now. Don't be afraid of the house. Be afraid of forgetting. Be afraid of the consequences if you don't remember." I nodded, trembling. The tapping slowed, almost expectant, like it was waiting for my next move. I forced myself to take a deep breath and reach. Into my mind, into the fragments that were mine. And for the first time, I understood the house wasn't just a place. It was a recorder, a predator, a guardian, and it wanted me to see the truth. The truth about that night, about the man, about the shots, about myself. I stepped forward, toward the center of the room. The shadow followed. The tapping echoed in time with my pulse. And I realized something terrifying. The house remembered everything, and it was waiting for me to remember too. The house didn't breathe, not in the way humans did. It remembered. Every footstep I took seemed to stir centuries of memory, dust motes dancing in the air like fragments of other lives. The floorboards moaned, and somewhere, deep in the walls, a rhythmic tapping began again, slower, deliberate, echoing the pulse of my own heart. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. I could hear Rowan moving behind me, his presence steady, grounding, but the shadows ahead seemed to thicken with every step. The air smelled of iron, old paper, and something metallic I couldn't place. And then came a whisper, soft, almost inaudible, carried on the draft that crept through the broken windows. Remember. I froze. The words scraped across my consciousness, jagged and insistent. It was not Rowan speaking, nor any voice I recognized. It was the house, commanding, demanding. What is it? Rowan whispered behind me. It's telling me to remember. I murmured. It knows I've forgotten. You're not wrong, he said softly, but you have to be careful. The more you remember at once, the stronger it becomes. The house feeds on your fear, on your uncertainty. We moved down a narrow corridor, the walls lined with peeling wallpaper patterned with roses that had long since rotted to brown. The floorboards creaked underfoot, every sound exaggerated, amplified, reverberating through the bones of the house. My pulse quickened. Then I saw it. A doorway at the end of the hall, darker than the rest of the room, a black maw that seemed to drink in the light. That's where it started, Rowan said, his voice barely a whisper. The first time you were marked, the night the man came, the night everything changed. I swallowed, stomach nodding. I don't remember him, I said, though a flicker of recognition gnawed at the edge of my mind. You don't have to fully remember yet, Rowan said. Just enough to survive. I stepped closer to the doorway. A cold draft seeped out, carrying the scent of damp wood and blood. My head throbbed at the edges, the pain sharp and familiar, the old scar tingling as though alive. And then I remembered fragments, flickers, a man, tall, faceless, watching me from the threshold of a room. 2 shots fired, the sharp, metallic sting of impact, blood flowing. A scream cut off mid-word, the tapping. Tap, tap, point. I gasped, clutching my head. It was him. I whispered. The man, he... Rowan's hand on my shoulder steadied me. Yes, he's the reason the others are trapped, and he's the reason you're here. I staggered into the room, the shadows seeming to pull back, making space, as though the house itself recognized my acknowledgement of the past. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, and then the floorboards beneath me shifted slightly, not in a mechanical way, but as if the house itself was breathing underfoot. I glanced down, faint impressions in the wood, footprints, or memories pressed into the grain, decades old but sharp as yesterday. I could see the shapes of people, hunched, crawling, pointing, warning, dying. They tried to tell me. I whispered. The women in the hospital, they weren't casting a spell, they were warning me. Rowan nodded. Exactly. And the house remembered that too. It's why the tapping, why the gestures. They couldn't speak, but the house could translate their warning into signs you could see. A gust of wind rattled the broken window panes, carrying a faint metallic scent, blood or memory of blood. Shadows shifted in the corners, forming figures too thin, too tall, their faces obscured, twisted, eyes hollow. Tap, tap, point. I flinched. Why didn't it kill me like the others? Because it miscalculated, Rowan said quietly. You were too resilient. Your mind is strong in ways it didn't anticipate. That's why you survived. But it's still hungry, and it still wants to complete what it started. I swallowed, feeling bile rise in my throat. What does it mean to complete it? Rowan's eyes were steady. To assimilate, to absorb what it needs, to take your mind and make it part of the house. The others, they failed. Their memories, their identities, became extensions of it. And now it's testing you. Watch and see if you'll survive where they couldn't. The tapping intensified, filling the room, vibrating through my skull. 2 taps, pause. 2 taps, point. A cold sensation ran down my spine. I realized the tapping wasn't just a sound. It was knowledge. It carried intent. It carried warning. It carried danger. I turned toward Rowan. I need to face it. I need to remember everything. You will, he said, but you have to do it carefully. One fragment at a time. Focus on the memory, not the fear. The house will try to trick you. It will try to scare you into forgetting. But you can resist. You have to resist. I stepped deeper into the room. Shadows seemed to curl around me, reaching, probing, but never touching. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. Then the sound changed, a low, almost imperceptible whisper threading beneath the tapping. You are not the first. You will not be the last. Remember before it's too late. I shivered, heart pounding. The fragments of memory pressed closer to the surface. The parking lot, the hospital, the gunshots, the tapping, the faces of the other victims. And then something new, a small, dark room at the back of the house, filled with objects I didn't recognize, but that felt familiar. The heart of it, Rowan whispered. That's where it keeps the first memories, where it stores what it takes. We need to go there. I swallowed, fear coiling like a snake in my chest. What will I find? Your past, Rowan said. And if you survive, a chance to reclaim yourself. I nodded, though my hands shook. Every step forward was a battle against the fear threatening to consume me. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The house watched, remembered, and waited. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. If I failed, the echoes of the past would claim me too. The hallway stretched endlessly, folding into itself in impossible angles. Each step I took pressed against a growing weight in my chest, the air dense, almost viscous. Shadows clung to the corners like tar, shifting subtly when I looked away, but always returning when I dared to glance again. The tapping had slowed now, almost contemplative. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, as if the house were pacing its own patience, waiting for me to falter. Rowan's presence remained tethered to reality, though even he seemed tense, eyes flicking toward the corners, toward the ceiling, as though expecting the walls to suddenly move. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "It's watching me, judging me." "Not judging," he corrected. "Learning, calculating, waiting for the moment it can strike the deepest." We turned a corner into what had once been a small library. Shelves lined the walls, splintered and warped, books strewn across the floor. Some covers were rotted beyond recognition. Others retained hints of their titles, faded letters whispering forgotten stories. But among the decay, I noticed patterns, scratches etched into the wood, barely visible lines running, in odd directions, forming shapes I couldn't quite comprehend. "The house leaves messages," Rowan murmured. "If you know how to read them, you can anticipate its movements. The walls themselves are a map of its memory." I nodded, though fear churned in my stomach. I couldn't imagine reading a house, couldn't imagine understanding it. And yet, instinctively, I felt a pull toward the far wall. There, in a corner shrouded in shadow, lay a trapdoor, almost invisible beneath the rotted rug and fallen debris. "That's it," Rowan whispered. "The heart, the room where it stores the first echoes, where it holds what it takes." I hesitated. The thought of what might be down there made bow rise in my throat. The air grew colder the closer we approached, a tangible frost that seemed to seep into my bones. Shadows flickered unnaturally along the walls, and I could swear I heard whispers. Not words, not language, just the echo of voices pressed against the air like fog. Rowan crouched, pulling the trapdoor open with a soft creak that echoed like a scream. A dark void yawned before me. The faint smell of mildew and blood drifted upward, mingling with the ever-present metallic tang of the house itself. "Ready?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can be." "You have to be," he said firmly. "If you hesitate, it will exploit your fear. You know what it wants." I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move, descending into the trapdoor. Cold stone pressed against my palms as I lowered myself, each step echoing in the void. The air was thick, heavier here, almost alive, pressing against my lungs, slowing my heartbeat, warping my sense of time. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. At the bottom, the space opened into a chamber, small, circular, walls lined with faintly glowing runes etched deep into the stone. In the center lay a pool of still water, black as ink, reflecting no light except the dim shimmer from the runes. The tapping seemed to emanate from it now, vibrating to the floor, through the air, through me. I stepped closer, heart hammering. Rowan stayed behind, hands raised in caution. "Don't touch it," he whispered. "Just look. Remember. Let it come to you." The water stirred on its own. Shapes shifted beneath the surface. Faces pressed against the dark liquid as if trapped. Screaming silently, mouths opening and closing without sound. My chest tightened. I recognized some of them. The women from hospital, their eyes hollow, their gestures frozen in the endless warning. Tap, tap, point. I staggered back, nausea rising. It's them, I whispered. "The first victims. They're here." "Yes," Rowan said quietly. "And it's try to integrate you with them. That's why I called you back. To finish what was started." I shook my head. I can't. I don't want to be like them." Rowan stepped closer, his face tense. "Then you have to remember every detail, every fragment of your past, every memory it's trying to bury. Only by reclaiming yourself can you resist it." I swallowed and forced my mind to dive into the fragments. The hospital, the parking lot, the sedan, the gun, the man, the shots. Tap, tap, point. The gestures flashed in my mind, clearer now, and I realized something horrific. The house hadn't just preserved their memory. It had preserved their terror, their trauma, and it was attempting to transfer it into me, layer by layer. My head throbbed violently as images overlapped. Memories I couldn't verify pressing against me. The basement apartment, the detective who never existed, the series of assaults, the fleeing north, the amnesia, the hospital, the tapping. My mind quivered, threatening to collapse under the weight. And then the water in the pool began to rise, slow but deliberate, as if drawn toward me. Faces pressed closer, hands reaching, whispering, tugging at my consciousness. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. I screamed, clutching my head, trying to block it out. But Rowan's voice cut through, firm and unwavering. Focus, not the fear, not the terror. Your memory, everything you own that is yours. Remember it, claim it, otherwise it will take you too. I inhaled sharply, closing my eyes. The chaos in my mind began to organize, fragments snapping together like shards of a broken mirror. I remembered the gunshot, the man's face, the hospital, the tapping, the warnings. I remembered the first 3 victims and their gestures. I remembered survival, pain, fear, and now resolve. The water receded slightly as I focused, the faces in it blurring, then sharpening, then fading into shadows. Tap, tap, point. I understood it now. The tapping wasn't just a warning. It was a map, a guide, and I could follow it to reclaim control. Rowan's hand pressed against my back. Good. Keep going. Don't stop. You're almost there. I nodded, breath ragged. The chamber's air seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, as if the house itself were aware of my mental focus. Shadows shifted along the walls, no longer threatening but curious, testing, waiting to see if I truly remembered who I was. And in that moment, I realized the house could store memories, it could amplify fear, it could manipulate reality, but it could not create a mind. It could only consume what already existed. I was still me, and I had to make it through. The chamber seemed to breathe around me. Each pulse of air carried whispers. Each flicker of shadow hinted at movement, though nothing tangible stirred. The faces in the pool had vanished into darkness, leaving only a faint reflection of my own pale, terrified expression. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm was relentless, insistent, like a heartbeat embedded in the stone walls. Rowan's voice broke the silence. It's testing you. It always tests first. What does it want from me? I whispered, my voice quivering, echoing strangely off the stone walls. It wants the part of you you've tried to bury. Every fear, every memory you've forgotten, every scream you've made in the dark. If it can absorb that, it can control you, turn you into another echo. I swallowed, the knot in my stomach tightening. I can't let that happen. You won't, Rowan said firmly, but you have to face it. All of it. I stepped closer to the pool, the black liquid rippling as though aware of my presence. I could see faint shapes just beneath the surface. Hands, faces, fragments of lives lost long before mine. Some reached upward, pressing against the unseen barrier of the water. Others twisted in impossible angles, eyes wide in silent terror. Rowan's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Look at them, not with fear, but with understanding. They're not trying to harm you. They're warning you. You need to absorb what they remember, so you can anticipate what's coming. I took a shaky breath and closed my eyes, letting the fragments press against my mind. I could see flashes, the hospital hallway, the sterile fluorescent lights, the tapping of fingers against temples, the parking lot, the dark blue sedan, the smile that didn't reach the eyes. My apartment, the detective who never existed, the basement where my mind had first fractured, and then the first 3 victims. I recognize them now. Their terror, their warning gestures, the synchronized tapping at Pinehurst. It had all been for me. They had tried to guide me through what the man had done, through what the house would do. The house had preserved their fear, amplified it, and now it was presenting it to me as a test. The water rippled violently, and suddenly, the room seemed to tilt. Shadows poured from the walls, coalescing into shapes far taller and more grotesque than anything human. Limbs bent at impossible angles, faces contorted into eternal screams. Tap, tap, point. The figures reached toward me, their eyes hollow, yet full of desperate warning. I stumbled backward, but Rowan's hand held me firmly. Focus on your memory. Focus on your mind, not their fear. I forced myself to breathe, to slow the hammering of my heart. The shadows paused, as if waiting for me to falter. I reached into the fragments of memory, the details that were mine, not the terror of the echoes. The hospital, the parking lot, the sedan, the gunshots, the tapping, my survival, the faces of the three women. I traced the sequence in my mind, connecting each fragment, aligning it into a coherent timeline. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if the house had noticed my focus. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The tapping seemed to hesitate, uncertain now. Rowan's voice was soft but firm. You see? It can't create memories, only consume them. You have something it cannot touch, your awareness, your will. Use it. I stepped closer to the pool again. The water was still black, but the faces beneath it no longer reached for me. They waited, still, as if observing my next move. I leaned over and whispered, I remember you, I see you, and I will not become one of you. The water shivered. Tap, tap, point. And then the room itself seemed to respond. The walls bending inward slightly, the floor vibrating beneath my feet, the air thick with a metallic tang of memory. I felt my head pulse at the scar, the old pain flaring, but I clung to the clarity I had gained. From the depths of the shadows, a voice, deep, hollow, layered with countless echoes, spoke. You remember, but can you endure? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The house wasn't asking for words. It was measuring my resolve, my focus, my capacity to hold on to myself while surrounded by the horrors it had consumed. I stepped into the center of the chamber, near the pool, and reached out my hand, not to touch the water, but to face it. The black liquid shimmered, and then the first face emerged fully. A woman, her hair cut close, her eyes wide in terror, her hand raised in a tapping gesture. Tap, tap, point. I nodded slowly. I understand. Then the second face emerged, a man this time, twisted and broken, eyes hollow, still repeating the gesture. Tap, tap, point. And the third. Tap, tap, point. I realized then, they weren't trapped in the pool. They were trapped in the house's memory. Their terror, their warning, their last moments. They had become part of its structure, and it had released them only to teach me how to survive. I swallowed, heart pounding. I remember. I will not forget. I will not let it take me. The shadows recoiled further, twisting violently, then dissipated into the walls. The tapping slowed, became irregular, then finally stopped. Silence pressed in, heavy and thick. Rowan exhaled, a rare note of relief in his voice. You did it. You held on to yourself. I leaned against the pool edge, trembling, sweat cooling on my skin. The room was still, yet I could feel the house watching, aware. Tap, tap, point. A faint reminder that this was not over. You're stronger than expected, Rowan said. But this is just the beginning. It will test you again and again until it's certain. And we haven't even reached the origin, the room where it was first awakened. I shivered, but now with resolve rather than pure fear. Then we go there. I'm ready. Rowan nodded. Good. But you need to stay focused. Whatever happens, do not let it fragment your mind. Not again. Not now. The staircase leading deeper into the house loomed ahead, descending into darkness thicker than night. I gripped the railing, feeling the chill of stone through my palms. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm resumed, faint, almost cautious. I knew then. The house had acknowledged me. It had tested me. And now it was watching, calculating, waiting for the next step. And I would take it, because this time I would not be consumed. Because I had remembered. Because I had survived. And because the echoes of the past were no longer just warnings. They were my guide. The house had a memory, but it also had a history. And we were about to confront both. The staircase in the chamber of echoes descended into darkness, so thick it felt like swallowing ink. My palms pressed against the cold, rough stone, fingers digging into grooves as I followed Rowan down. The tapping that had guided me so far now slowed, hesitant, almost like the house was unsure whether I would continue. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. Are we going deeper than anyone ever has? I asked, my voice a whisper, nearly swallowed by the oppressive silence. Rowan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led me into a narrow hallway. The walls here were raw, almost organic, streaked with deep brown stains that smelled faintly of rust and iron. The air was heavier than before. Each breath tasted metallic and cold. This is where it began, Rowan finally said. The first memory it ever consumed. Before the hospital, before Pinehurst. Long before your arrival, it awakened here. A low hum thrummed through the stone, vibrating through my chest, through my bones. I pressed my hand against the wall, and it pulsed beneath my fingers alive. The house was aware, watching, judging, waiting. We reached a door unlike any other in the house. No wood, no visible handle, just a smooth black surface that absorbed the light around it. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The sound echoed from somewhere deep within, resonating with the pulse at my scar. Rowan placed his hand on the surface. This is it, the room of origins. Everything started here. The first rituals, the first integrations, and inside the first entity. I swallowed, dread coiling in my stomach. First entity? Yes, Rowan said quietly. The one that shaped the house. It's older than the building itself, older than any of the victims. It feeds on memory, fear, trauma. It's the reason the house can remember, and it will test us both, harder than before. The black door shifted slightly under Rowan's touch, open with sigh like the exhalation of centuries. A cold wind poured out, carrying whispers of names, cries, and laughter twisted into something inhuman. I felt it scrape against my consciousness, probing, trying to sense my weaknesses. Tap, tap, point. I stepped inside, Rowan close behind. The room was circular, walls covered in carved runes glowing faintly in hues that shifted like liquid. The floor was stone, worn smooth by countless feet or claws over unknown decades. And in the center, a figure. It hovered above the ground, its form barely human, barely solid. Limbs stretched too long, twisted in impossible angles. Its head tilted unnaturally, and the eyes... oh, the eyes, black voids filled with flickers of every memory it had consumed. Faces pressed against the surface, screaming silently, shifting endlessly. Tap, tap, point. It moved as we did, though we hadn't given it cause. Shadows flared, walls pulsed. The air grew thick with electricity. My pulse matched the tapping. Each throbbed like a hammer in my skull. Rowan stepped forward, voice steady but low. This is the core. Everything Pinehurst, the hospital, the women, it all flows from this. It stores memories here, manipulates them, projects them outward. But it can't create new minds. It can only feed. I swallowed hard, trying to focus. My memories, fragile but intact, glimmered at the edges of consciousness. I had survived its first tests. I had learned its rhythm. Tap, tap, point. The echoes of the victims guided me, warning me. The entity spoke, voice layered with countless echoes, deep and resonant. You remember, but are you strong enough to endure what comes next? I didn't answer. I could feel the pain flare in my scar, the memory of gunshots, the hospital corridor, the tapping at Pinehurst. I forced myself to breathe, to center my mind. I whispered. The entity shifted, and suddenly the chamber expanded impossibly, walls stretching and folding. Shadows poured from the runes, coalescing into new forms. Figures I recognized. The three women, distorted but recognizable, pointing, gesturing. Tap, tap, point. They weren't hostile. They were warning, guiding. Rowan's hand gripped my shoulder. Use them. Let their memories flow into you. Let them teach you. Only by absorbing what they endured can you hope to withstand this entity. I stepped forward, closing my eyes, letting the fragments wash over me. The echoes of pain, fear, and survival intertwined with my own memories, forming a chain of understanding. I could see the patterns now. The way the entity reached through memory, through trauma, trying to overwrite the living mind with its own. I opened my eyes. The entity recoiled slightly, as if sensing my clarity, my awareness. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm slowed. The room vibrated with a low hum, energy pulsing through the air, feeding the scars of my mind but no longer threatening to consume them. You see, Rowan said, it's not omnipotent. It has limits. You are alive. You are whole. And now, you have to make it know it cannot take you. I swallowed hard, chest tight. And if it resists, it will, Rowan said. But fear is its weapon, not yours. It can scream, it can threaten, it can twist its form, but you control your mind. The rest is just echoes. I stepped closer to the hovering figure. It shivered, shadows flaring, whispering in a chorus of memories. I focused, each fragment of my past solidifying, each lesson from the victims crystallizing. Tap, tap, point. I mirrored the gesture instinctively, raising my hand to my temple and pointing outward. The entity recoiled sharply, letting out a sound that was more vibration than a noise. The shadows faltered. The pool of memories beneath it rippled, and I could see the truth. It had never been able to consume a mind fully aware of itself. It relied on fear, confusion, and amnesia. And now I had none of those. The air around the entity pulsed, thickening with every heartbeat. Shadows stretched and curled around the chamber like living smoke, writhing as though impatient, as though aware that I had begun to resist. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm continued. Not just a sound, but a living signal. A thread connected me to the memories of the first victims. I clenched my fists, trying to anchor myself, focusing on the fragments of memory that were mine. Hospital corridor, parking lot, sedan, gunshot, pinerist, the tapping, faces in the pool, tap, tap, point. Each memory shivered and aligned, weaving together a chain strong enough to resist the entity's psychic pull. The figure loomed higher, elongating unnaturally, limbs bending into impossible angles, shadows spilling like ink across the walls. Its voice resonated again, layered with thousands of echoes, both human and something else. You remember, but remembering is not enough. Fear is not enough. Only despair can feed me fully. Only submission will make you part of the house. I shook my head, trying to silence the rising panic. I won't be part of you, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I am not yours. I am myself. I remember. I survive. The entity recoiled slightly, as though the words had physical weight. Shadows writhed, forming into grotesque, half-recognizable faces, twisted mockeries of the women from Pinerist. Tap, tap, point. They gestured toward me, urging warning. I realized something. The entity relied on the terror it projected into its victims. It couldn't dominate a mind fully aware of its own strength. Rowan stepped closer, his voice cutting through the oppressive hum. It's testing you, not just to consume you, but to see if you can resist. Use what you've learned. Every fragment of memory, every echo of the first victims, they're your allies. I drew a shaky breath and focused on the pool beneath the entity. The black water rippled, and faces pressed upward, silent but vivid. I could almost hear their words, the way they had tapped, the rhythm of their gestures. Tap, tap, point. I mirrored them. Tap, tap, point. My mind aligned with theirs, a chain of consciousness bridging the living and the echoes. The entity shrieked, or perhaps it was more like the vibration of broken glass, and the shadows recoiled. Tap, tap, point. Its rhythm faltered, uncertain, and for the first time, I sensed vulnerability. I stepped forward, hands raised, pointing firmly toward it. Tap, tap, point. The entity twisted violently, its form writhing, trying to break connection, but the chain of memories held. The first victims, Margaret, and the two others, pressed through the water, reinforcing the rhythm. Tap, tap, point. You cannot take me, I said aloud, voice strong, resonant. You do not own me. I am myself. I remember. I survive. The entity shuddered, shadows collapsing inward, then flaring outward in waves. The runes along the walls pulsed violently, almost in agony, and the air vibrated with a high-pitched hum that made my teeth ache. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm was breaking. Rowan's voice rose above the hum. Keep it going. Don't stop. Focus. I forced myself to remember everything. The hospital, the parking lot, the gunshots, the tapping at Pinehurst. I reached deeper, drawing in memories that were painful, raw, terrifying, and yet mine. The entity screeched again, a sound that rattled the bones of the chamber, the shadows twisting violently before attracting into the walls. Then, for the first time, it spoke with a note of uncertainty. You remember? Too much. You survive? Too well. How? I am not afraid of you, I said firmly. You feed on fear, on forgetting. I will not give you either. The shadows convulse, elongating, merging, separating. The entity's voice layered over itself in a chaotic cacophony, a storm of echoes and half-formed screams. Tap, tap, point. Its rhythm faltered entirely. The runes on the walls pulsed once, violently, then went dark, leaving the chamber in a dim, lifeless glow. I stumbled back, trembling, but the chain of memories remained. The pool beneath the entity rippled once more, then settled, the faces within now calm, watching silently. Tap, tap, point. The message was clear. The victims were no longer bound. They had survived through me, and now the entity could no longer dominate their echoes. Rowan exhaled deeply. It's weakened, but not gone. You disrupted its process, forced it to respect the boundaries of the living mind. It won't forget this, and it will not forgive it. I sank to my knees, chest heaving. The weight of memories of terror, of survival pressed down on me. But strange clarity emerged through it all. I remembered the women, their gestures, their warnings, the tapping. I remembered the hospital, the parking lot, the gunshots, the detective who never existed. I remembered survival, terror, pain, and resolve. The entity's form shivered, shadows retracting, the room quieting. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm had slowed, subdued, no longer menacing. And then it spoke one final time. You endure, but the house remembers forever. Rowan helped me to my feet. We've disrupted it, he said quietly, but it's part of the house now. It will remain a threat, as long as the house exists. But you survived. You reclaimed your mind. I nodded, swallowing hard. The room was silent now, but I could still feel the pulse of memory in the stone, the whispers in the walls, faint and subdued. Tap, tap, point. A reminder that while the entity was weakened, the house still remembered, and it would always remember. We turned toward the stairs, ready to leave the room of origins, and I realized something chilling yet empowering. The house could manipulate, terrify, and consume, but it could never take what I had reclaimed. My memories, my awareness, my resolve, they were mine, and no shadow, no entity, no tapping could ever take them from me. And yet, as we ascended back toward the surface, I felt the subtle pulse of a warning deep in the walls. Tap, tap, point. The house had survived, and it would continue to test, continue to feed. But now I was ready. The room of origins faded behind us as we ascended the stone staircase, each step echoing in the hollow silence of the house. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm persisted, faint now, like a heartbeat buried deep in the walls, a reminder that the house still watched, still remembered, still waited. Rowan's hand stayed on my shoulder, a tether to reality, though even he seemed tense. We've disrupted the entity, he said quietly, but that doesn't mean the house is neutralized. What you felt there, it's only a fragment of what this place can do. It stores trauma like a collector stores treasures, and every corner of this house is steeped in it. I swallowed hard, still trembling from the confrontation. So what now? Now, he said, we explore the remaining chambers. The house feeds on memory and fear, but it also leaves traces of its past in its architecture. If we can follow those traces, we might understand why it exists and maybe how to leave it behind. We moved slowly through the winding hallways. Shadows clung to every corner, flickering as if the walls themselves were breathing. Dust motes drifted in the dim light, and every step on the warped wooden floors seemed to echo centuries of footsteps, some human, some not. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm of the house was subtle now, but I could feel it in my bones. Every sound, every flicker of shadow, every shift of air seemed deliberate, calculated. It was aware of us, testing us even as we walked, but it had learned something too. We were aware. We were resisting. We came to a corridor lined with doors, each unique. Some wood, some metal, some covered in strange, unidentifiable symbols. Rowan stopped before a door carved from dark, almost black wood, streaked with veins of red and brown. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the residual tapping. "This one," Rowan said, voice low, "contains residual echoes of the first 3 victims. Their final memories, their terror, their attempts to communicate before the house consumed them. If we listen carefully, we might learn how the house feeds and what it wants from its next target." I nodded, trying to steady my trembling hands. Rowan reached out and pushed the door open. A chill wind escaped, carrying whispers, fragmented, distorted, but unmistakable. Tap, tap, point. Inside, the room was small, circular, walls lined with mirrors, each cracked and warped. The reflections were not of us, but fleeting images. 3 women, contorted in fear, tapping at their temples, pointing toward the door, pointing outward. Their movements were erratic, almost frantic, and yet perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of the house. "They're trying to warn us," I whispered, just like a Pinarus. "Yes," Rowan said. "The house keeps them here, in this loop. It amplifies their trauma, stores it like a record, and projects it outward to the next potential victim. That's how it feeds." I stepped closer to mirrors, and for a moment, their eyes seemed to meet mine. Tap, tap, point. A chill ran through me. I realized that the house wasn't just storing their memories. It was preserving their emotions, their fear, their confusion. It wasn't just a memory palace. It was a trap, a machine designed to transmit trauma. Rowan placed a hand on my shoulder. "We have to be careful. The closer we get to these echoes, the stronger the pull. It will try to absorb you, to make you part of the loop." I nodded, swallowing hard. The air in the room felt thicker, heavier, as if the house itself were pressing against my mind. The tapping grew louder, almost deafening now, resonating not in the room but in my head. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was relentless, pressing against my consciousness, testing my resolve. I focused on my memories, the hospital, the parking lot, the gunshots, the detective, the survival. I let the fragments align, forming a chain of awareness that connected me to the victims without letting their fear overwhelm me. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm slowed, faltered. Rowan guided me to the center of the room, where a faintly glowing sigil was etched into the floor. "This," he said, "is the anchor. The house uses it to tether the echoes to the physical space. If we disrupt it carefully, we can sever the link, release them without letting the house consume you." I stared at the sigil, heart hammering. The shadows in the mirrors shifted violently, faces screaming silently, hands tapping, pointing. Tap, tap, point. The house resisted, testing us, threatening to overwhelm my mind. "Focus," Rowan said. "Trace the rhythm. Let the echoes guide your hand. You've survived worse." I took a deep breath, aligning my awareness with the tapping. My fingers traced the edges of the sigil, feeling the cold stone beneath them, feeling the pulse of the house in time with the echoes. Tap, tap, point. Step by step, I followed the rhythm, letting it flow through me, not against me. The mirrors quivered, the shadows flaring violently. Tap, tap, point. Faces twisted, try and pull me into their loop, but I held my focus, anchoring myself in my own memories. Tap, tap, point. A sudden flash of light erupted from the sigil, blinding me for a moment. The shadows screamed, recoiled, and then collapsed inward, drawn into the floor as the echoes solidified into a single wave of energy. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm slowed, then stopped entirely. The mirrors now reflected only our faces, unwarped, silent. The room was still. Tap, tap, point. A faint echo lingered, but the pull had weakened. Rowan exhaled, his expression tense but relieved. "They're free," he said quietly. "The echoes are no longer trapped." But the house, it will not forgive this. It will remember you. I sank to the floor, trembling, overwhelmed by the intensity of the confrontation. The tapping had been relentless, the psychic pressure immense, but somehow I had survived. I had resisted. And yet, the house still loomed above, silent, patient, waiting. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm had changed. It was no longer a warning. It was a challenge. The house no longer whispered. It screamed. Every wall, every floorboard, every shadow seemed alive, shifting and twisting as if the architecture itself had grown restless. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm that had guided us in the past was gone, replaced by chaotic murmurs that pressed against the mind, scratching at memory, threatening to unweave thought itself. Rowan led me through the twisting hallways, his face tight with focus, eyes scanning every corner. The house is destabilizing, he said quietly. Freeing the echoes weakened its anchor. It's trying to compensate, to reassert control. It knows we interfered. I swallowed, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. My scar throbbed painfully with each step, a hot reminder of my past trauma, and the house's power to exploit it. Tap, tap, point. Even without the rhythm, the memory of the tapping persisted in my mind, a ghostly echo I couldn't escape. The corridors were now unfamiliar, folding in on themselves in impossible angles. Doors led to nowhere, walls extended infinitely. Ceilings dropped and rose as if the house itself were breathing. Every turn brought a new wave of nausea, disorientation, and fear. This way, Rowan said, pressing a hand against a wall that seemed to ripple beneath his touch. There's a chamber ahead, something the house hides from most intruders. It's where experiments with reality, the place where memory and matter converge. I hesitated. The energy in the walls pressed against my chest, tight and suffocating. Shadows move of their own volition, shapes twisting into faces, hands, impossible limbs. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was fractured but present, a fragmented heartbeat that teased the edge of my consciousness. Rowan moved first, stepping into the chamber with deliberate care. I followed, hand shaking. The room was vast, larger than any part of the house we had encountered. The floor was polished stone, reflecting the distorted, angular ceiling above. In the center floated a series of orbs, glowing faintly, each containing a flickering scene, a memory, a moment, a fragment of life consumed by the house. I recognized some of them instantly. The hospital, the parking lot, the blue sedan, the faces of the three women, the tap-tap point gestures. Others were unfamiliar, scenes of people I didn't know, places I had never been, yet each radiated the same pain, the same terror, the same sense of being trapped. They feed on it, Rowan said quietly. Each orb is a memory the house has consumed. It amplifies the trauma, projects it outward. That's how it manipulates reality. That's how it lures its victims. I stepped closer, drawn against my will. One of the orbs pulsed brighter as I approached, and the memory inside reached toward me. The first victim, eyes wide in silent terror, tapping at her temple, pointing outward. Tap, tap, point. I stumbled back, heart racing. It's alive, I whispered. Rowan's hand pressed firmly on my back. It's not alive in the way you think. It's a record, a projection. But it acts alive because it's tethered to the house's will. Focus, Paige. Focus on yourself, not the memory. I closed my eyes, forcing my mind to align with my own memories, the hospital, the gunshots, the tapping, my survival. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm returned inside my mind, guiding me, anchoring me. The orbs pulsed in response, flickering, stabilizing. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low vibration hummed through the chamber, pressing against my skull. Tap, tap, point. Shadows twisted violently at the edges of my vision, coalescing into humanoid forms, echoes of the past victims, distorted and desperate, reaching for me. I forced myself to step forward, raising my hand in the tapping gesture instinctively. Tap, tap, point. The echoes mirrored me, aligning with the rhythm. The shadows shrieked, twisting, then dissolved into stone walls. Tap, tap, point. Rowan exhaled, but his voice was tense. Good, but it's adapting. The house learns. Every time we resist, it recalibrates. And now it's testing something new. Watch. The floor beneath us shifted. The orbs rose, spinning, merging into a single massive sphere in the center chamber. From it radiated a blinding light, a pulse of raw psychic energy. The memories inside began to scream, not in words, but in sensation, each one pressing against my mind, trying to overwhelm my senses. I staggered, clutching my head. Tap, tap, point. The gesture alone was enough now. I had to channel memory, emotion, trauma, and awareness simultaneously. My scar flared with pain, each throb a hammering reminder what the house could exploit. "You can do this," Rowan shouted. "Anchor yourself. The entity we faced before, it's part of this. Focus on your survival. Focus on you." I inhaled sharply, letting every fragment of my life, painful, terrifying, and sacred, align into a chain of conscious awareness. The orb's pulse pressed harder, but I resisted, stepping closer, letting my mind tether the fragment of memory I had reclaimed. Tap, tap, point. The sphere shuddered violently, projecting a wave of psychic energy that nearly knocked me off my feet. The orbs inside spun, twisting and bending, some shattering, others stabilizing. Shadows screamed, twisting into forms that were grotesque parodies of human figures, yet all movements echoed the tapping rhythm. Tap, tap, point. Rowan's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. Use the rhythm, not just the memory. The pattern, control it, or it will control you. I mirrored the tapping, felt the energy pulse through my veins, and for the first time I realized the house could only manipulate what I allowed it to touch. Fear, doubt, hesitation. They were its instruments. I had reclaimed my mind, my memories, my resolve. Tap, tap, point. The massive sphere convulsed, then cracked. Light exploded in the chamber, shadows collapsing inward, the echoes of trauma recoiling into silence. Tap, tap, point. And then the room was still. Rowan helped me to my knees. It's weakened but not gone. The house will remember this. It will test again. But for now, we've survived another layer of its power. I nodded, heart hammering, sweat running cold along my back. The tapping had returned, not as a threat, but as a faint pulse in the walls, a reminder that the house watched, adapted, and waited. "And we're not done," Rowan said, voice tight. "There's still more. More rooms, more echoes, more horrors. But we've learned its rhythm, its limits, and that gives us a chance. A real chance." I forced myself to stand, brushing dust and sweat from my clothes. Tap, tap, point. The pulse was faint now, almost cautious. The house had been disrupted, but it was still there, still alive in its own way. And as we moved deeper into the hallways, I realized survival wasn't just about escaping. It was about understanding, mastering, and enduring. And I had survived this far. But the house had plans. Tap, tap, point. The house was no longer just a building. It was a predator. Every hallway bent against us. Every doorway shifted unexpectedly. Every shadow whispered promises of despair. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was there, buried deep in the walls, now unpredictable, like a heartbeat fractured into 1,000 pieces. Rowan led the way, his eyes sharp, scanning corners that seemed to twist before our very eyes. "It's learning," he said. "Every step we take, it adapts. This level of the house isn't just memory. It's instinct. It's hunting." I swallowed hard, my scar throbbing painfully with each step. The air was thick, charged with a sense of expectancy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The walls seemed to pulse, flex, and the floors undulated beneath our feet, warping subtly like water. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm hit my mind, irregular now, taunting, teasing, testing. We came to a junction, the hallway splitting into multiple directions, each path curling impossibly, bending in ways that defied physics. Shadows clung to the walls, flickering and twisting into half-formed human shapes. Tap, tap, point. A reflection of the tapping victims appeared in the shadows, gesturing, urging us, warning us of what lay ahead. "Which way?" I asked, voice trembling. Rowan hesitated. "We don't choose the path. The house does. We follow the rhythm or will lead us astray. I glance at the shadows. The faint tapping gestures etched into my memory. Tap, tap, point. I mirrored them instinctively, lifting my hand to my temple and pointing forward. One hallway seemed to shift in response, walls curling back, opening a path. We stepped forward cautiously. The hallway extended infinitely, or at least it seemed that way. The shadows moved with us, their gestures becoming more frantic, more urgent. Tap, tap, point. Faces twisted in silent terror, echoing the first victim's attempts to communicate. A sudden draft carried whispers, disjointed and frantic. Remember, survive. Do not forget. The voices overlapped, some human, some not, creating a cacophony that pressed against my mind. Tap, tap, point. My scar throbbed violently, and for a moment, I felt the house attempting to claw through my consciousness, testing for weaknesses, for fear. Rowan's hand gripped mine. Focus on your memories, he shouted. Your pain, your survival, your awareness. Don't let it touch you. I forced myself to breathe, drawing fragments of memory. The hospital, the gunshots, the blue sedan, Pinterest, the tapping gestures of the victims, the room of origins, the pool, the orb chamber. Tap, tap, point. Aligning each fragment like a chain, I anchored myself in reality. The shadows recoiled slightly, their whispers faltering. The hallway narrowed, walls closing in. Floorboards groaned under our weight, vibrating with a low, menacing hum. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm grew louder, insistent, almost desperate. Shadows pressed closer, faces grotesque parodies of human expression, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide and hollow. A door appeared at the end of the corridor, black and featureless. Tap, tap, point. The house pulsed through it, energy vibrating in the air. Rowan nodded grimly. This is the next test. Beyond this door is a chamber that will challenge everything you've learned. Memory, fear, pain, all of it. It will push your mind to the edge. Are you ready? I nodded, though my stomach twisted. I have to be. Rowan pressed the door open. A gust of frigid air hit us, carrying the scent of decay and iron. Tap, tap, point. The chamber was massive, circular, walls lined with mirrors, their surfaces cracked and rippling. Shadows moved independently in the reflections, twisted versions of ourselves, of the victims, of things I couldn't fully comprehend. A low vibration hummed through the floor, resonating with my scar. Tap, tap, point. The shadows coalesced, forming humanoid figures that mirror the first three victims, their gestures frantic and urgent. They pressed forward through the mirrors, reaching, tapping, pointing. Rowan stepped in front of me. Do not falter. Align with their rhythm, but keep your memories separate. The house will try to absorb you, to make you part of it. Hold yourself together. I closed my eyes, raising my hand in the tapping gesture. Tap, tap, point. The shadows mirrored me, but I focused inward, drawing on my own memories. Pain, terror, survival, clarity. The chamber trembled violently, shadows screaming, mirrors shattering, yet the chain held. Tap, tap, point. The house throbbed around us, energy pressing, walls vibrating. I could feel the memories of countless victims, not just the three women, pressing against my mind, trying to invade. Tap, tap, point. I forced myself to resist, channeling the echoes through my awareness rather than letting them consume me. A sudden scream pierced the air, not from the shadows, but from inside me. My mind threatened to fracture under the weight, but I clung to the rhythm. Tap, tap, point. The shadows faltered, mirrors cracking further, energy flaring, then receding. Rowan's voice was sharp, commanding, "Hold it! Do not break! You can survive this!" I gritted my teeth, raising my hand higher, tapping, pointing, aligning my consciousness with the echoes without losing myself. Tap, tap, point. The chamber shuddered, then fell silent. The mirrors now reflected only us, distorted but intact. Tap, tap, point. A faint echo lingered in the air, a reminder that the house still watched, still remembered, still waited. Rowan exhaled, tension visible in every line of his face. We've survived another level. But it will not stop. It will escalate. And next, we face what it does to those who fail. I nodded, heart hammering, pulse wild, but resolute. The house may remember, it may adapt, but I had reclaimed my mind. I had survived, and I was ready for what came next. Tap, tap, point. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy like a storm trapped inside stone walls. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm pulsed faintly beneath the floorboards, but was jagged now, unpredictable, erratic. A heartbeat fractured into splintered pieces. The house was no longer just observing. It was hunting, testing, bending the very fabric of reality against us. Everything changes here, Rowan said quietly as we moved down the hall. The house will blur memory and present. Don't trust your senses. Don't trust what you remember. The house will try to make you question everything you survived. I felt it immediately. The hallway ahead stretched impossibly, expanding and contracting as we approached. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, twisting into half-formed faces I knew but couldn't place. Tap, tap, point. The gesture was familiar, urgent, but it came from something that shouldn't exist. A door appeared on the right, warped, as if the wood itself had melted and reformed. Through its jagged frame, I glimpsed the hospital corridor, the one I had walked countless times in memory. Fluorescent lights flickered, shadows moving just outside the frame of vision. The tapping, tap, tap, point, echoed from the corridor, but the voices were distorted, overlapping with whispers from Pinehurst, the blue sedan, and even the woods in Hartwell County. Rowan's hand gripped mine. It's layering reality with memory. Don't step inside. It's a trap. You can't distinguish what's real. My pulse raced. The scar at my temple throbbed violently, a hot reminder of my past trauma, and I realized the house was targeting it, probing, testing. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm fractured in my mind, each beat dissonant and wrong. My memories started blending. The hospital, the parking lot, the detective at my door, the gunshots, all colliding into one impossible sequence. I shook my head, trying to anchor myself. Focus. Focus on what's mine, I whispered. Not theirs. Not the house's. Mine. Rowan guided me forward, careful steps through the warped corridor. The walls flexed, twisting into angles that should have been impossible. Each step made the floor ripple beneath our feet, as though we were walking on water frozen in time. Tap, tap, point. Shadows pressed in, mimicking our movements, gesturing in frantic warning. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, not from the shadows, but from inside me. The house was seizing fragments of my memories, blending them with the echoes of others, forcing me to relive the gunshots, the hospital, Pinehurst, and the tapping victim simultaneously. Tap, tap, point. My mind screamed, try to separate what was real from what was projection. Rowan's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. Anchor yourself. Focus on your survival. The rest is just illusions. I clenched my fists, closing my eyes, drawing every fragment into one coherent chain. The hospital corridor, the parking lot, the blue sedan, the scar on my temple, the tapping victims. Tap, tap, point. The shadows flinched at the alignment, recoiling slightly. The house roared, walls bending violently, the ceiling folding inward. The floor dropped beneath us, then lifted again, a wave of impossible geometry. Tap, tap, point. The distorted hallways stretched into infinity, each reflection showing fragments of my past, some accurate, some twisted beyond recognition. A figure emerged from the shadows, Rowan, or at least a version of him. His eyes were hollow, his face twisted in a grotesque mimicry of his usual calm. Tap, tap, point. He mirrored the gestures of the original victims, pointing frantically, trying to guide me or warn me. Not real, I whispered to myself. Not real, anchored to me. The hallucination lunged, merging with shadows and memories. Tap, tap, point. I felt the psychic pressure, the energy of the house trying to overwrite my perception, to make me doubt my own survival. I forced myself to raise my hand, tapping at my temple, pointing outward, mirroring the gestures that had saved me before. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm synchronized with my memories, creating a protective chain. The shadow of Rowan faltered, screaming silently as it recoiled. Suddenly, the walls themselves seemed to pulse with faces. Countless eyes, mouths frozen in silent terror, all pressing toward me. Tap, tap, point. The house tried to engulf my consciousness, to force me into the cycle of echoes it had built. Rowan's voice, real and commanding, cut through the chaos. Push back. Align with your memories, not theirs. You are alive. You are aware. I drew in a deep, shuddering breath, focusing on every fragment that was mine. My survival, my pain, my resilience. The hospital, the gunshots, Pinehurst, the parking lot, the tapping victims. They were echoes now, guides, not masters. Tap, tap, point. The hallway convulsed violently. Shadows screaming, walls folding inward, mirrors cracking and splintering. The figure of the false Rowan collapsed into darkness. The house faltered. Tap, tap, point. I opened my eyes, chest heaving, body trembling, but my mind intact. The distorted hallway had stabilized. The shadows withdrawn, and the warped architecture had settled into a semblance of normalcy. The rhythm in the walls, the tapping, was faint now, cautious, subdued. Rowan exhaled, relief visible but tight in his expression. You survived. Again. But it's learning faster now. Each time we resist, it escalates. And next, it will test more than your memories. It will test your perception of reality itself. I nodded, exhaustion threatening to consume me, but a strange clarity emerged. The house could manipulate, distort, twist, and terrify, but I had reclaimed my mind. I had survived its assaults, and I was no longer just a victim. I was a participant in this battle. Tap, tap, point. The faint rhythm lingered in the walls, a reminder, a warning, a pulse of something far older and more dangerous than we had yet faced. And I knew the next confrontation would be the hardest yet. The house had learned. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was gone from its subtle form. Now it hammered against my mind in jagged bursts, irregular and violent, as if the walls themselves were beating a warning, a threat, a declaration. Every corner of the distorted hallways pulsed with intent. Shadows no longer waited. They advanced. Rowan's face was tight, eyes scanning the warped corridors. It's no longer testing subtlety. It's going all in. Every illusion, every fragment of memory, every shadow you resisted, it's trying to breach you now. We moved cautiously, feet dragging through floors that seemed to ripple beneath our weight, walls bending, stretching, folding at impossible angles. Tap, tap, point. The house pulled on my mind, tugging at memories, warping perception. A door appeared, black, jagged, radiating a chill that cut through my spine. This is the next level, Rowan whispered. Beyond here, it's not just illusions. It's a trial of body and mind. Reality itself becomes unstable. I nodded, gripping my scar, the hot pulse of pain a reminder of past trauma, and the house's lingering power. Tap, tap, point. Shadows skittered along the walls, morphing into humanoid forms. Faces twisted into grotesque parodies of the first victims. They reached, tapping frantically, pointing at something just beyond the edge of comprehension. As we stepped through the door, the world shifted violently. The floor dropped beneath us, walls curling into infinity, and the ceiling stretched impossibly high. Tap, tap, point. The echoes of Pinehurst, the hospital, the parking lot, and the blue sedan collided into one continuous nightmare, blending memory and reality until I couldn't tell which was real. Anchor yourself. Rowan shouted. Focus on what's yours, your body, your survival, your awareness. I closed my eyes, breathing hard, letting the tapping gestures guide me. Tap, tap, point. I traced the rhythm in my mind, aligning it with fragments of memory I still claimed. My survival, the gunshots, the hospital corridors, the tapping victims' warnings. Shadows shrieked and recoiled, but the pull of the house was stronger now, pressing against my consciousness like a physical force. Suddenly, the floor shifted violently, sending me stumbling. Rowan caught me, but the momentum dragged us both into a whirl of distorted geometry. Tap, tap, point. The walls rippled like water, mirrors appearing and cracking instantly, reflections of ourselves twisting into grotesque parodies. I heard whispers, familiar voices, distorted beyond recognition. Tap, tap, point. You are mine, broken mind. I forced myself to step forward, raising my hand in the tapping gesture instinctively. Tap, tap, point. The shadows hesitated. The rhythm faltered, but only for a moment. Then the house responded with force, hurling illusions of fire and falling debris, fragment of reality twisting into physical threats. Move! Rowan shouted, pulling me forward. We ducked under shards of warped mirror that dropped like blades, narrowly avoiding them. Tap, tap, point. The shadows screamed, converging on us, each movement synchronized with a fractured rhythm. I gritted my teeth, forcing the fragments of memory together into a chain of conscious awareness. Tap, tap, point. Hospital, gunshots. Parking lot, Pinehurst, blue sedan, tapping victims. Each fragment a tether, a lifeline. Shadows lunged, walls twisted, but the rhythm held, forcing the house to hesitate. Then came the breach, the first true attempt to overwrite my mind completely. A wave of psychic force slammed into me, pulling memories outward, tried to merge them with the echoes of the first victims. My chest tightened, throat constricted, and the world blurred. Tap, tap, point. I focused, every fragment of memory aligning into a protective chain. Rowan's voice was sharp, slicing through chaos. Don't let it own you. Fight. Anchor yourself. Your memories are yours. I mirrored the gestures, tapping, pointing, aligning my awareness with my own memories. Tap, tap, point. The shadows convulsed violently, screaming silently, then began to retreat, drawn back into the warped walls. The floor stopped rippling. The ceiling stabilized. The room, or what it now pretended to be, fell into a grim stillness. Breathing hard, I realized we had survived the house's first true assault on both body and mind. But Rowan's expression was grim. It's adapting faster than we can predict, he said. It knows now that we resist its influence. Next time, it will escalate again. And it won't stop at memory. It will rewrite reality itself if it can. I nodded, wiping sweat and blood from my temple. The scar throbbed, a persistent reminder that survival here wasn't just about resisting the supernatural. It was about enduring pain, confronting trauma, and refusing to be rewritten. Tap, tap, point. The faint rhythm lingered in the walls, subdued but insistent. A warning, a challenge. And as we moved further down the distorted corridors, I understood the grim truth. The house would continue to escalate, and the next confrontation would push the limits of sanity, memory, and reality itself. Tap, tap, point. We were walking into the heart of the storm. The hallway ahead was no longer linear. It twisted impossibly, folding in on itself like a living maze. Shadows clung to the warped walls, pulsating and twisting, each step making the floorboards groan like tortured bones. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm throbbed in my skull, fractured now, irregular, like a heartbeat shattered by violence. Rowan led, but his movements were cautious, precise. Every corner, every door was a trap. The house no longer needed subtlety. It manipulated everything at once. Walls, floors, shadows, light, sound. My mind screamed at me to stop, to resist, to run, but the corridor seemed infinite, and moving backward was impossible. I felt the house brushing against my thoughts, probing, testing the integrity of my awareness. Tap, tap, point. Memories of the hospital corridor, the Pinehurst discharge room, the blue sedan, the gunshots, flashed violently in my mind, overlapping, merging, threatening to drown my consciousness. Anchor yourself. Rowan shouted. Do not let it rewrite you. Do not let it own you. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus. The tapping gestures, tap, tap, point, became my lifeline, a rhythm to tether my mind to reality. I visualized a chain of my memories, my survival, the scar on my temple, the warning victims, the shadows we'd already resisted. Each fragment aligned into a protective lattice inside my mind. The shadows lunged suddenly, coalescing into humanoid forms that twisted into grotesque parodies of Rowan and me. Tap, tap, point. They mimicked every movement, every gesture, creating an impossible reflection of our struggle. The floor beneath us buckled violently. We stumbled, nearly falling into an abyss that hadn't been there a second ago. The walls bent inward, narrowing the corridor to a jagged slit, and the ceiling arched impossibly high, warping perspective until distance and height lost all meaning. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway. A woman, her face familiar but distorted. Tap, tap, point. She raised her hand to her temple, pointing at me, her eyes pleading and empty all at once. The house was showing me them, the previous victims, warning me, or taunting me. Do not look directly. Rowan yelled, pulling me back. Do not let it convince you. But my eyes had already met hers. I felt the pull, the psychic weight of countless traumas pressing into my consciousness. Tap, tap, point. My mind screamed against the intrusion, trying to differentiate what was mine and what the house had created. The corridor shifted violently again. Light splintered. Shadows twisted into impossible angles. Mirrors appeared and shattered instantly, reflecting fractured versions of ourselves. The house was rewriting reality around us, using memory and perception as tools to break us. I forced my hand to my temple, tapping, pointing, aligning with the rhythm we had learned to survive by. Tap, tap, point. The shadows faltered, recoiling as the alignment anchored my awareness. The figure of the woman dissolved into the warped walls, screaming silently as the corridor stabilized just enough to move forward. We stumbled through the hallway, breaths ragged, bodies trembling, but the house was relentless. Tap, tap, point. The walls seemed to pulse, vibrating with intent, bending to test us again. Next, Rowan said, voice grim, it will attack everything. Your mind, your perception, your body. It will escalate until it either destroys you or you understand its limits. Brace yourself. The air grew colder, heavier, almost viscous. The floor warped again, creating impossible inclines, and shadows crept up from every surface, merging with reflections of ourselves, the previous victims, and fragments of memories too grotesque to fully comprehend. Tap, tap, point. A sudden surge of force slammed into me from all sides. Psychic pressure, tactile force, and the pull of warp reality. I cried out, stumbling, and Rowan caught me, holding us upright as the hallway twisted and undulated violently. The shadows screamed in silence, their gestures frantic, pointing at something we couldn't yet see. Hold. Don't let go of your awareness. Rowan shouted. Use your memories. Your survival. Your mind is yours. Do not let it pull you into the loop. I clenched my fists, feeling every fragment of memory. The hospital, Pinehurst, the blue sedan, the gunshots, the tapping victims. A line like a chain. Tap, tap, point. I traced the rhythm in my mind, forcing the house to acknowledge my control over myself. The shadows convulsed violently, shrieking silently, then receded, drawn back into the warped walls. The hallway straightened slightly, though everything still vibrated with residual energy. Tap, tap, point. The house had failed to break us this round, but I could feel it learning, adapting, preparing for the next assault. Rowan's grip tightened on my shoulder. We've survived for now, but the house isn't done. Its goal isn't subtlety anymore. It wants to see if we can endure, if we can survive its full power. And soon, there will be no guidance, no anchors, no rhythm. Only survival. I nodded, breathing hard, heart hammering, my scar throbbing, but strange clarity emerged. The house was formidable, adaptive, and relentless, but we were alive. We had survived every test so far, learned its rhythms, reclaimed our awareness. Tap, tap, point. The faint rhythm lingered in the walls, a pulse, a warning, a promise of escalating terror. And I realized the final confrontation was coming. We were walking straight into the heart of the house's intent, and only one question remained. Will we survive it intact, or become another echo trapped forever in its warped corridors? The house waited. Not with whispers, not with shadows, not with tapping rhythms. This time, It waited in silence, a silence so thick it pressed against my chest, filling my lungs, making each breath a struggle. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was gone, replaced by anticipation, a void that demanded awareness, focus, survival. Rowan and I stepped into the central chamber, the heart of the house. The walls here were ancient, blackened timber intertwined with veins of stone, pulsing faintly with a light that seemed to breathe. Shadows congregated in the corners, hesitant, almost deferential. Tap, tap, point. The echoes of past victims, the fragment of our memories, the warped reality of the hallways. It all converged here, drawn to a single locus of power. This is it, Rowan said, voice tight, almost reverent. The heart, the origin of its power, the source of its consciousness. I swallowed hard. The scar on my temple throbbed violently, a burning pulse that matched the rhythm in my mind, the internal echo of everything I had survived. Tap, tap, point. The air vibrated with anticipation, reality bending subtly, faint reflections of corridors and rooms folding into the chamber itself. A voice spoke, deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls and floor simultaneously. Not human, not quite supernatural. It was the house, and it knew. Why do you persist? It asked, each syllable of physical pressure against my skull. Why do you survive? Why do you resist? I felt Rowan stiffen beside me. It can talk? I whispered. It has always spoken, he said. We just couldn't understand it. It uses memory, rhythm, perception, but it speaks through what we carry in ourselves. The chamber shifted. Shadows rose on the floor, forming twisted, overlapping figures, the victims, the echoes, the house's former captives, all layered in impossible geometries. Tap, tap, point. Their gestures were frantic, urgent, pointing outward, gesturing to me, pleading, warning. The house was showing me the culmination of its purpose. It wasn't a trap designed to kill. Not entirely. It was an instrument of understanding. A predator that consumed awareness, trauma, memory, and perception, using them to expand itself, to learn, to evolve. You survived the corridor tests. It continued. You endured the distortions. You resisted the shadows. You maintained identity where others failed. But the final test is not endurance. It is understanding. It is acknowledgement. Will you see what you are part of? I clenched my fists, breathing ragged. The echoes pressed against my mind, memories overlapping with shadows, with fragments of the victims, with distorted versions of myself. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm returned, not from the house, but from within me. A pulse, a heartbeat, a tether to reality. I realized then, the house didn't just feed on memories and trauma. It required awareness, participation. It demanded recognition. The previous victims had failed because they hadn't understood, hadn't integrated their awareness into the rhythm. They had resisted, yes, but they hadn't comprehended. Rowan's voice broke through my thoughts. It's showing you everything. The hospital, Pinehurst, the blue sedan, the gunshots, the victims. It's all connected. You are the fourth, yes, but you're also the key to its understanding. The shadows convulsed, forming a singular figure, me, or perhaps what the house believed I was. Tap, tap, point. The reflection of myself raised its hand, pointing at my scar, at my memories, at everything I had survived. You must see, the house intoned. Understand the cycle. Accept the truth of your survival. Recognize the fractures in your mind, the echoes in halls, the rhythm that binds you to reality. Only then, I raised my hand, instinctively, to my temple. Tap, tap, point. The gestures I had learned, the rhythm I had internalized, the chain of memory and awareness. I projected them outward, aligning with the house's projection of me. The echoes of the victims, the distortions of reality itself. The chamber shuddered violently, walls folding inward, shadows screaming, then pausing, frozen. Tap, tap, point. For the first time, the rhythm was not broken. It harmonized, not imposed, not fractured, but complete. A synthesis of awareness, memory, survival, and comprehension. The house responded. The shadows dissipated, folding into the walls. The warped architecture stabilized. The pulse in my scar softened, aligning with the heartbeat of the chamber. The chamber itself seemed to exhale, a wave of release, as if acknowledging something fundamental. Rowan exhaled sharply. You did it. You aligned yourself with it. You survived its final test. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a clarity I hadn't experienced since before the gunshots, before Pinehurst, before the endless tapping of the victims. The house was not just a predator. It was a reflection of trauma, memory, and survival, testing the resilience of consciousness itself. You understand, the house intoned one final time, and in understanding, you endure. The others failed. You survived. The chamber began to dissolve, the walls, the shadows, the warp hallways folding inward until nothing remained but Rowan and me, standing on solid, familiar floor. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm lingered faintly in the air, a gentle pulse, a reminder that awareness and memory were tools of survival, not weapons of destruction. I turned to Rowan, voice trembling. It wasn't trying to kill me. Not really. It was testing me, showing me what I was capable of, what we all are. He nodded slowly. Yes, and now, it knows you will survive anything it throws next. It respects that. But it won't forget. The house never forgets. I touched my scar, feeling the pulse of survival, of memory, of awareness. Tap, tap, point. The gesture was mine now, a rhythm of resilience, of life reclaimed from trauma, from manipulation, from terror. The house remained, somewhere beyond the layers of walls, shadows, and memory, but I had endured it. I had survived the distorted reality, the echoes of past victims, the psychological assault, the physical manipulation. I had aligned myself with the rhythm of survival, and for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. Tap, tap, point. The house waited, but I was ready, and so we walked out the heart of the house, scarred, trembling, but alive, and forever changed. The air outside the house felt different, not lighter, not safer, just quieter in a way that pressed against my mind. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was faint, almost imperceptible, like a ghost of the pulses I had learned to survive. But it was there, buried beneath the hum of ordinary life. Rowan and I walked down the dirt road that led away from property, leaves crunching beneath our feet. Vermont's autumn light was golden, but it didn't touch the shadows in my mind. My scar throbbed faintly, not with pain, but with memory, the lingering echo of what I had endured. It's over, Rowan said quietly, though his eyes betrayed tension. We survived. The house can't touch us now, at least not in the same way. The air outside the house felt different, not lighter, not safer, just quieter in a way that pressed against my mind. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm was faint, almost imperceptible, like a ghost of the pulses I had learned to survive. But it was there, buried beneath the hum of ordinary life. Rowan and I walked down the dirt road that led away from the property, leaves crunching beneath our feet. Vermont's autumn light was golden, but it didn't touch the shadows in my mind. My scar throbbed faintly, not with pain, but with memory, the lingering echo of what I had endured. It's over, Rowan said quietly, though his eyes betrayed tension. We survived. The house can't touch us now, at least not in the same way. I nodded, but the world outside the house felt subtly warped, as if reality itself had been peeled back and exposed. Tap, tap, point. The rhythm pulsed faintly at the edge of perception. Sometimes I could hear in my dreams, faint tapping against my own skull, pointing, urging, warning. We reached the main road. Cars passed by, oblivious of horrors hidden in the woods behind us. Rowan glanced back once, as though expecting the house to appear behind the trees. Nothing, just the quiet hum of life, and yet I felt it. Tap, tap, point. The lessons of the house had etched themselves into me. Awareness wasn't just survival, it was a shield. Memory wasn't just pain, it was a tether to reality. Trauma wasn't just a wound, it was a map, a guide in navigating the unseen currents that sought to manipulate and destroy. We drove silently toward Burlington, the road stretching endlessly. My thoughts drifted to the previous victims. The shadows in the corridors, the tapping gestures that had saved me. Tap, tap, point. Their warnings, their fractured attempt to communicate, now felt like a chain connecting all of us, a rhythm that would endure long after the house itself faded into the forest. Yet the world outside the house was not untouched. Lights flickered in strange ways when I walked past them. Shadows bent and lingered in corners. Sounds of footsteps sometimes followed when no one was there. I would catch a reflection in a window, my own face staring back. But behind my eyes, I felt the pulse of the house, quiet, patient, waiting. Rowan glanced at me, reading my unease. "You feel it too," he said. "Even outside, it's there." "Yes," I admitted, "but it can't reach me the way it did before. I've survived it. I know its rhythm." Tap, tap, point. The rhythm had become part of me. A silent, personal mantra against the shadows in the corners of the world. Against the echoes of past horrors, the remnants of the victims, the distortions of memory. Even as ordinary life resumed, lights, traffic, laughed in the distance, I knew it was there, a faint pulse beneath the surface, a warning that awareness must never falter. We stopped at a small cafe in Burlington. People moved around us, oblivious. I sipped coffee, tasting normalcy for the first time in months. But the scar on my temple reminded me, survival comes at a price. Tap, tap, point. Rowan finally smiled faintly, a shadow of relief in his expression. "We made it," he said. "We survived the house." "Yes," I whispered, "but some part of it will always be with us. In the rhythm, in the echoes, in the scars. And as long as we remember, we endure. And as long as we endure, we survive." Outside, the trees swayed in the wind, golden leaves tipping toward decay. The forest seemed quiet, but I knew better. Tap, tap, point. Somewhere in the woods beyond, the house waited. Silent, patient, ever learning. And in that quiet, I realized survival was not an end. It was a vigilance, a continuous awareness. The horror may be behind us, but its lessons, its pulse would never leave. The cafe's door jingled as new customers arrived. Laughter, chatter, clinking cups. The world was alive, ordinary, safe, or at least it seemed so. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse beneath the surface. Tap, tap, point. And I knew some doors once opened, never truly close.